Introduction Part 2. Before the Victorian era, Britain had few railway lines in existence. Those that were running were mainly built between coastal areas, rivers and towns to aid transportation for industries. They rarely carried passengers and were expensive to run. By 1838, engineers like Robert Stephenson and Isambard Kingdom Brunel had become involved, leading to Britain becoming a revolutionised country. The building of railway lines, bridges and tunnels enabled the transportation of goods and passengers by steam across large areas of the country, turning Britain into a thriving workforce. The Victorian era was to produce the birth of both the Industrial Revolution and Britain's network of railways. London to Birmingham Railway. One of the first railway lines to open was on 17th September 1838 from London to Birmingham. This line connected London to the Midlands. It had been planned since 1833 before Queen Victoria came to the throne. The Kilsby Tunnel south of Rugby was completed and enabled the 112-mile line designed by Robert Stephenson to be opened. The London to Birmingham line was the first railway line into the capital. Passengers disembarked at the newly designed Euston Station. This line prompted the start of the Great Railway Boom. Brunel's Great Western Railway. The Great Western Railway opened in 1841. With Isambard Kingdom Brunel as its chief engineer, it is thought to be one of the wonders of the Victorian era, and is known to be one of the straightest railways in the world. Isambard Kingdom Brunel was a civil and structural engineer, and was later voted second greatest Briton of all time, behind Sir Winston Churchill. Amongst his achievements in the construction industry, aside from the Great Western Railway, he was involved in building steamships, bridges and tunnels and many other engineering marvels. The initial GWR line ran from London Paddington to Bristol. 7 years later, railway lines from Bristol to Exeter and Bristol to Gloucester were also constructed. Locomotives were commissioned and built for the Great Western Railway and were designed by Sir Daniel Gooch. These could run at a speed of 67 miles per hour. Due to the gauge Brunel used for the lines, trains were unable to run into Euston, and this is why Brunel chose to build his own station at Paddington. In December 1840, the railway had reached Chippenham. It crossed the centre of town on a viaduct that was also designed by Brunel. Whilst work continued from the east, construction also began on the western section from Bristol to Bath, which came into service in 1840. Alongside all handouts, please spend time looking through some original telegrams, letters, invoices, estimates and plans for alterations and building works to be carried out on the Great Western Railway. Please note that whilst these are dated 1915 to 1916, they do make reference to 1905, and feel that as it isn't that far from the end of the Victorian era, they should show good examples of how communication would have occurred and how work is carried out. This is original GWR paperwork that is around 100 years old. Then came the London to Brighton line. This is a timeline of Isambard Kingdom Brunel's life. London to Brighton Railway. In the 30 years between 1841 and 1871, Brighton was the fastest growing town in England. Situated on the south coast, it had a direct rail link to London. The first train arrived in a London station in September in 1841. Class system on the Victorian railways. Passenger carriages on the rail system. In Victorian times, people of the middle and upper class wealth saw themselves too important to be travelling with those who lived in poverty. Train carriages initially only offered first-class travel to passengers, meaning anyone with little or no wealth was unable to use the service. Throughout the following few years, companies then added a third-class service, allowing access to those in poverty, and finally a second-class service for the well-established family. These carriage systems were to be in place for years, only to start being phased out in the mid-1900s, with first-class options still in operation today at a premium cost. Railway mania. As more railways were built, accessibility throughout Britain was at its easiest when railway mania arrived. By the mid-1840s, many of Britain's railways connected, and Mr. George Hudson was appointed to carry out the first large-scale amalgamation of the railways. In the years to come, access through to Scotland from London was also achieved. The geographical area covered by the railway system has grown enormously, with a vast amount of the major main lines being completed during the Victorian era. The maps on the following slide show detailed growth of the Victorian railways and include geographical maps both pre- and post-Victorian times for comparison. Please see handouts for larger copies of these maps and large copies of area maps showing a colour-coded key detailing and explaining when exactly each rail line was built and introduced. Take note of how much growth took place during the Victorian era. The next three slides shows a timeline of UK railways. Pay attention to the highlighted section which covers the Victorian era. Religion during the Victorian railway boom. During this time, religion was a very big part of people's lives. The majority of British people practiced Christianity, with a smaller minority practicing Catholicism. Church was always attended on Sundays, and pre-1940s the vast majority attended twice a day. The Bible was regularly read at home. Leading up to the railway boom, work was in short supply, especially in towns and villages, and this is where dedication to the church was thriving. The explosion of the railway boom offered jobs to many in these areas and changed the way most people led their lives. Life became busier for people, and responsibility to jobs meant that the commitment people had with the church was no longer sustainable in the same way. The 1851 census showed that only 50% of the population was now attending church. Previous estimations had shown the percentages to be far higher. With more chances of work for those in poverty and industrial opportunities developing in Britain, people no longer had the ability or time to put the church first. For those that hadn't compromised their religion for work and wealth, another problem that appeared to incriminate church had arrived. Along with the boom the railway was providing, it had also offered the opportunity for a new type of crime. Trains had become a dangerous place for the lone person to be, and carriages were often occupied by robbers, pickpockets and murderers. Disguises were often worn by such criminals, and dressing as clergymen was common practice. Many travellers were led to believe by these criminals that the Church of England had ordered the mass exchange of incumbents. A loss of support for the Church obviously followed. Comparisons to today's railways. The mid-1900s saw electric lines and diesel engines slowly introduced. Steam was slowly phased out and the rail network was broken down and sold to private companies. The grandeur of the train is long gone, as is its importance to the economy and industries compared to the Victorian era. Growth of the motor vehicle and an increase in roadways in Britain means that it is no longer the first choice for companies that wish to transport their goods. The introduction of the car has also enabled the passenger more flexibility and choice over how they travel. Sadly, Britain's current rail status is in serious decline. The following link shows the decline and closure of lines and stations over the later years.